It just keeps getting better, doesn't it? So how about that movie, folks? I've watched it a lot of times over the years, but there were parts in there I can't remember seeing because they were so dark on all the crummy bootlegs. Finally, you can see that movie the way it was intended to be shown. If you look at that cinematography, it was absolutely amazing. And this was made by a guy who had never made a movie before, by a crew who was a lot of them volunteers, actors, who may have been their first movie. So it's really amazing what was done. It captured some magic, and it captured the legend of the Fouke Monster that will live on. And so this is something that has been long overdue, and we have here cast members from the movie, and some of the crew members, and some who are related to some of the cast members assembled here tonight. We're going to do a little Q&A so we can take some questions from the audience and have them answer. I'm going to do my best to introduce everybody just so you know who's up here. Right here on the front row, I have Glenn Carruth. He played Bobby Ford. You may remember him jumping through a door in the movie. This is Ginger Hawkins Roush. She was in the trailer scene with the bullets scattering on the floor and the tension building. Of course, we know Pamula Pierce right here. She was also in the movie, if you recall, when they went out to the edge of the field and were looking and the monster frightened them and they ran back to the house. That was Pam. This is Tommy Clark. He worked for the Leadwells and was instrumental in working in part of the crew and the business and making this movie happen in many ways. Here we have John Tennyson, who is cousin of James Tennyson, who is the landlord that you see in the forward. So he's representing today, and James Tennyson was in some of the other Charles Pierce movies as well. Here's a guy I was just talked to on the phone yesterday, so I'm bringing them on board quickly. This is Jerry Chapman. He was in the hunting scene where they had the dogs, and he was also the guy that flew the plane on those fantastic aerial shots. And knowing that, I watched some of those aerial shots, which were just absolutely amazing. This wasn't flying a drone from the ground. This was in a plane flying over Fouke. This is Kathy Cox Lee. She was in the trailer scene. Miss Bunny Dees, who played Miss Ford in the film. There's a panther under the house. One of our favorite lines. And this guy is known as the baby of Boggy Creek. This is Aaron Ball, who was in the Ford scene. This is an actual reenactment of that scene. He doesn't look so much like a baby. He grew up to be a striking man, an opera singer no less. And on the far end, we have Jaime Mendoza Nava Jr., who is the son of the composer of the music, Jaime Mendoza Nava. And this is his sister, Vicky. So it's fantastic to have all these folks here tonight. We'll take some questions for the audience. I think there's a microphone somewhere. And, just, it can be directed specifically at one of the cast members here about one of the scenes, or maybe a question in general that one of them could answer. So keep it to just one question. Please keep it concise. If you've seen the Fouke Monster, we'd love to hear the story tomorrow. I got one for Glenn. Glenn, did you ever get your business done? You had a hard time going to the bathroom. Were you ever able to get it done, buddy?
I sure did.
He did. We've been waiting about 50 years to hear that answer.
I just wanted to ask if it was really scary being out there. It looked scary when y'all made it, the movie. In the Boggy Creek, it's Pam.
Somebody who was on set, I mean, like, when you guys were in the trailer scene, did you feel the fear? There's a mic there. Did you feel that tension of the creature?
Well, we really did, and one of the, is it on? Okay, one of the great things was that Mr. Pierce told us to go off script when you saw us, scrambling for the bullets and the rifle and all that kind of stuff. He said just kind of turn it loose, go off script, really get into it, and we really did. And we really got that rifle loaded too, right into my stomach. No safety was on, so that's just a little tiny bit of behind the scenes trivia. So yes, it was very scary.
Did you want to add to that, Kathy? Pass the mic. I mean,
I was just going to say, when we filmed it, we were actually out in the woods in a trailer, 3 girls and cameraman and Charles Pierce, and it was scary. And I have to say, when I looked out the window, somebody, who will remain nameless, jumped up in front of the window with that suit on and just about killed me. Steve Ledwell.
he's probably going to jump out here in a minute somewhere. Well, I mean, that's portrayed in the movie because you can feel that. I mean, that's not, some of it doesn't seem like acting, it seems like reactions, and that's effective in the movie. Do we have another question?
I wanted to ask, was the fellow who was hurt and taken to the hospital, was that a true story?
I can answer that one for you. Yes, ma'am. Bobby Ford, and there's an article from May 1971 in the Texarkana Gazette, and what's portrayed in the movie is, I mean, Charles Pierce just simply retold that in a very cinematic and sensational fashion, but those are all based on actual reports from actual people. And Bobby Ford was taken to the Texarkana hospital after something attacked him down there at that house in Fouke. And that in fact is how the story got out, because when they went to that hospital, there was a doctor and the nurses, and this guy said, I was in Fouke and I was attacked by a big hairy monster. So the doctor called a reporter here, Dave Hall, a radio reporter, and told him the story, and that's how it ended up getting out in the newspapers, and really was a critical point in which Charles Pierce was reading these newspaper articles and thought, man, this would make a great documentary, and later it became, hey, this is a film. And so yes, that stuff was true. Now, whether he was attacked by a creature is still unproven, but nonetheless, what he reported was that he was attacked by a monster. Another question? Yes, yes.
I had a Twitter follower that asked, did any of the people in the film have nightmares?
Did anyone have nightmares from this? Pam's had the most nightmares because she's had a lot on the line here. So yes, the movie still inspires nightmares. But Aaron, pass Aaron the mic there.
This one's, yeah, there we go. Yeah, well, so I was almost 3, right? And some of my first memories are of that shoot, or of that production. And the Fouke Monster has invaded my dreams recurringly all my life. And it's true. She could say that.
I said, are you sure that wasn't me?
Well, there's a funny story about that. And so I was not a fearful child, and Charlie and my father, who was the art director and production designer for the film, and 3 other subsequent films of Charlie's, they couldn't get me to cry. And of course, my crying is a big part of that climactic scene, right? And they could not get me to cry one bit. I just wasn't a fearful child. I wasn't scared of anything. So they got down, my father and Charlie, and whispered into my ear, really quietly, "Aaron, your mother has left forever. She is never coming back." And all hell broke loose. Now, what do you have to say?
Until tonight, I did not know that that's what they had whispered to him. I thought they were handing him to me because every time he handed him to me, he cried. So therefore, I have lived with guilt for 47 years.
And we're so sorry for that, buddy.
This is sort of like therapy, and we're getting answers to life here at this screening. Questions?
Miss Pamela, hi, I'm over here. Can you describe getting to the Eastman Museum and what the budget was for the restoration, the role of the British Film Institute?
Sure. Can you hear me? So I was able to acquire a 35mm film from eBay. Lyle had alerted me to it. And when I received it, actually Michael Logan is here in the audience. He reached out to me over Facebook and asked me if I had anyone to restore it, and I did not. He said he had connections with the George Eastman Museum, and would I like to have him reach out to them for me, and of course I did. So I went to them almost immediately. The budget for the film restoration was $15,000, and there was another $15,000 for the sound restoration at Audio Mechanics. So that covered that, and then I had the legal side of it. So $30,000 for the two elements together.
So yes, by buying a ticket and coming here tonight, you're helping to have made this happen, because this was part of it, not just simply releasing a Blu-ray later, but to help cover the cost of what it costs to restore this. You know, just what Pam's had to do over the last at least 2 years. I mean, which we've been talking longer than that about this, but yeah, it's quite a feat, and to be done pretty much single-handedly, or at least directing this whole thing. So it's an amazing accomplishment. I know her father would be extremely proud of this, because this is exactly what he had to face when he made this movie. You know, and he went to Hollywood to find a distributor and people to do the soundtracks, and people were like, "What? You've never made a movie? You're from Arkansas, and it's about Bigfoot?" And people shut the door. So he had to do it himself. So he was, in fact, what independent cinema is now, and people can make their own movies using their desktop and a camera they bought at Walmart. But back then it was a lot harder to do. So just to make that movie is a feat unto itself. And then what Pam has done is reflective of that, in just being a person who has the determination to restore this movie and to be able to offer it like this. So it's quite an accomplishment, and in my mind, a movie could be made about Charles Pierce and what he did as an independent filmmaker. So that movie's coming, or that documentary. So this is the first step. Yes.
My name is Lee Ward, and this is my father, Autry Ward, and Steve Ward, who's already had to leave. But my question to you is, they were both in bootleggers, and I was just wondering, are you going to do any more remastering of any of the other Charles B. Pierce?
The question, these guys were in, if you know the other film, Bootleggers, which was Charles Pierce's second, these guys were in it, and the question is there going to be a remaster of Bootleggers and some of the other ones? Pam?
Yes, Yes, sir. Mr. Letwell assigned me the copyrights for both The Legend of Boggy Creek and Bootleggers, and we have located the original elements for Bootleggers, so it will be next to be restored.
And if you haven't seen Bootleggers, it's a great movie as well. So I'm excited about that.
I don't think I need this thing.
You don't. Was there really a path over to the house?
Here we go. But, y'all can hear me, can't you?
Use the mic.
Okay. I just want to commend Pam for doing this because knowing her mom and dad during the filming and all that, this has got to be a moment in time for her, and I'm sure they're looking down smiling on her. But I also want to say, besides being a very talented director, Charles Pierce, whether you realize it or not, did a lot of the voiceovers for many of the characters, and he also did the first song in the movie. He sang that. So he was a man of many talents, besides the fact that he was an excellent director.
True. This is really so great. So, Glenn, how many times did you have to jump through that door? One take. One take. How many screams? Or how many?
You know, it broke the glass, and when I went through it, so there wasn't no way we could have a new door and everything before we was in. So I had to make it work the first time.
That's good filmmaking. How many? Your father did the score for this. Can you give us a brief? How did Charlie get a hold of your father, and how did they strike up that relationship that he was able to do the score? Because the score is another great part of this movie. It's very professional and well done.
Thank you very much. He was, my father knew the writer Earl Smith, and my dad had started, he came actually born in Bolivia in South America, and studied in the US and in Europe, and then started to work at Disney, and he did music for the Mickey Mouse Club and Zorro, and met Earl somewhere along the line, and they started to do training films for the Navy. And so I think that was the connection. I was talking to Mr. Clark about it, that it was probably Earl that was the glue that sort of brought everybody together. And then Earl introduced him to Charlie, and I can remember as a boy going into the studio and seeing those gentlemen there, and it was we've talked about it, that it was just really an amazing time to see them, people from very diverse backgrounds, all coming together to get the film done. So that's how it went.
Well, it worked.
We have a question back here at the back.
Hi, my name is Travis. Came all the way down from Pennsylvania to see this, and wanted to thank Pamela for all the hard work and honoring her father. But as a creative person, also with a daughter, it's our hope as artists to leave legacies, not just for our kids, but we want to make the world a little bit better, a little bit more interesting at least. I want to thank you for the hard work and presenting this. And I guess the question I had is, could you tell a story about your dad? What do you remember most about him as a person, as a creative? But I just want to thank you again for restoring this, for influencing people like Lyle, like me, people who were interested in the field of hidden animals and cryptozoology, people who are interested in filmmaking and the arts. And I just wanted to thank you so much. But again, the question is, could you please tell us a story about Charles and what you remember him as a father and as an artist?
Thanks so much. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you all for coming out here too. You all are the reason that I'm here. I heard the comments or read the comments through since at least 2001, when I first went on the computer and asked Jeeves, who was Charles B. Pierce. My dad was, as everyone says, was very creative. He was very funny. He was probably the funniest person I've ever been around. He was very charismatic, lots of energy, as you probably have heard him called spark plug and those kind of things. When I first heard about Boggy Creek, or the Fouke Monster, I believe I was in the 2nd grade. I was in school. It was raining. It was early in the morning, and I went in. Actually, we didn't have recess that day because it was raining. We went into the cafeteria, and all the kids were talking about the Fouke Monster. I guess it had been in the newspaper that morning, and so I could not understand what it was. They were talking about a monster, but I knew that there was no such thing as a monster. And so I was a bit perplexed. The next thing I remember is my dad telling my mother that he was going to make a movie, and it was going to be about Bigfoot, and it was about this creature, and I was at the top of the stairs when I heard him talking, and I remember eavesdropping on my parents, and my mom was very calm and said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And so the next thing I remember was my dad sitting on the floor of our apartment, the living room, and he had the manual for the camera, and he was assembling the camera and reading the directions. So that's how much of a newbie he was. Shortly after the film premiered, it was very successful, as you guys have probably heard. And so almost immediately he bought a Corvette. And so he would stuff his 3 children into the back of the Corvette and drive from here to Shreveport every night to pick up the receipts. I think Tommy did some of those drives too. So we would go to the Strand, and at that time you had to wait a certain amount of time before the box office would release the receipts. So I think it was probably 3/4 of the way in. But I would sleep in the back in one of the chairs while we waited, and then they would release the money and we would drive back to Texarkana. Always with my father, if we were awake, would slow down the car and act like we were running out of gas at Boggy Creek. Tommy told me, Tommy was the business manager for Mr. Ledwell. So when my dad decided to make the movie, he was looking for money, and he went, of course, to Buddy Ledwell. And Tommy told me not long ago that Mr. Ledwell pointed at him and said, follow that guy, he's costing me way too much money. So I'm gonna let him say something, because this is the man that I believe wrote the checks. It was Mr. Ledwell's money, but he was making sure that it was spent in the right direction.
I was what the industry called a bag man. You know, there's something that's interesting about what Pam was referring to is back in those days when we finished this film, we didn't really have enough money to buy prints, and we finally scraped up enough money to buy 4 prints, and we were showing it in, I think, in Tyler and Longview and Shreveport and Texarkana, and we were having to pay for the theaters in advance, so there was no percentage deal. So we had to pay the theater in advance to show the movies, and the way this film actually got into distribution, and a lot of people don't know this, but you'll remember Joy Theater that used to be here in Texarkana. Well, Joy Houck owned the string of Joy Theaters, and that's where we were showing the movie in Shreveport. And what really caught his attention was not only the box office, but this was a huge concessions film. And I don't know, I mean, you all paid $10 for a box of popcorn, so you understand that concessions are a huge moneymakers for these theaters. And the Legend of Boggy Creek was selling popcorn like crazy. So that's what really caught Joy's attention, and Joy Houck actually approached us because of the grosses at his theaters and asked to distribute the film, and he was the one that gave us the money to buy prints to actually put it into distribution.
Well, You know what we need next up there at the merch booth? Boggy Creek popcorn. Our imaginations run wild with this stuff.
Our Boggy Creek wine. Boggy Creek wine.
For anyone who may be seeing the movie for the first time tonight, or maybe haven't seen it in a while, can you talk a little bit more about the improvements in how the restoration looks?
It looks amazing compared to the crummy bootlegs, basically. I mean, basically it's just been, there was some VHS releases, and I think most of the digital versions have been people filming a VHS on a screen. That's been copied and copied and copied. Some of those scenes are just black. There was stuff in the movie, I'm like, I don't remember this. It's because you can't see it in those other ones. So, technically this obviously used in modern restoration process, but the improvement is astronomical. I didn't see it originally as an adult, but I'm sure it may exceed what it was like back then on those prints. I don't know.
I would dare say it's better because of the technology, the 4K and the Blu-ray aspects kind of pop it just a tiny bit. But you can see the creature again. He was lost for almost 50 years, and he's back, as you can see.
Mm-hmm. You can see, especially in the background of those films, you can see further into the woods. You can see the locations. I thought Jerry here flew the plane on those aerial shots. I mean, what are some of your recollections on even shooting those scenes?
Well, the first day I met Charles Pierce, I could tell that he was very determined to make a good quality film, because he was very insistent that he wanted the best pictures that he could possibly get. And being a young pilot, I certainly was all for that, but as we got in the air, we spent several hours filming, and I'm not sure which of the shots that you saw in the movies was actually from the plane that we were flying. But I remember, he wanted the plane to slow down. He had the door open, the window open, and you could tell that Charles was really intent on making a quality movie. And super nice fella, and I just bring back a lot of memories from my earlier years, and I appreciate you, Pam, for all the work that you've done. And there was no fear about him. If he saw a duck on the water or wanted to fly by the Fouke Water Tower, the closer was the better. But wonderful guy. Thank you, Pam.
Hello. Yes. I was curious who played the creature in the film, and I had two other questions with that. What has he done since then, and what has happened with the suit?
That's another top question I always get. Where's the suit? Well, there was several guys that played the creature in the film, and one of them is this big fella right here in the Perot Theater, Mr. Keith Crabtree. Being the creature, he's mysterious and elusive, but he does appear from time to time, and when you see him, you can understand why he was in the suit. And then it was later worn by Steve Ledwell and Steve Lyons. So it just, the movie was just made as they could. So the suit was worn in different scenes by different actors, and okay, the other thing was, where's the suit?
The suit, I wanted to mention something about the suit because when we got to our part, which were the two families and with my child here, Steve Ledwell, Mr. Ledwell's son, was playing the monster at that time. That house where we were filming was right below, believe it or not, right below the Ledwell's home on Summerhill Road. And But the suit, what was funny is I had this really thick, long Texas hair, brown, and they used to tease me, say, "You're the monster, you're the lobster." Well, it was very funny because the suit actually added a lady's fall over the front. So when I was walking, you know, and they go, "Oh, look, there goes your hair, bunny." And I'm like, "Ooh." But that was kind of an addition when you see that. That's a lady's fall on his face.
I believe
Not that long, but yes, long scraggly hair. Yes, so it was fairly accurate.
I believe it was a rental suit, wasn't it?
Right.
And they sewed wigs. And
To my
bottles on
understanding, it was at the time, I mean, you gotta think of the time period, you could rent a gorilla costume, you couldn't rent a Bigfoot costume. They rented a gorilla costume, unsewed the chest piece, because gorillas had that thing, and then added the wig onto that. And when the movie was complete, they took the wig off, stitched the chest piece back on, and returned it to the rental. And that's why there is no suit to show, is because these guys are on a budget.
And that they you're talking about, Lyle, that was my father. It was John who was doing his magic with the wig and the returning.
Another interesting aspect is, of course, the Ralph McQuarrie painting poster that goes with it. And also, John Wall, Aaron's dad, was the art director, and he did the cut and paste along the bottom that says The Legend of Boggy Creek, and later goes to work for Hallmark Cards and created Shoebox Greetings. So you have two kind of Titan artists there represented on that one poster also.
Right, because you're aware of the poster, the iconic Legend of Boggy Creek poster was painted by an artist named Ralph McQuarrie, who later went on to do the concept drawings for a guy named George Lucas, who was trying to shop a film called Star Wars to 20th Century Fox. And so what you see is the concepts of Darth Vader, C-3PO, and those characters were designed by Ralph McQuarrie, whose first movie poster was The Legend of Boggy Creek. So, I mean, I'm telling you, Charles Pierce could recognize good art directors and good artists before they were even to their, maximum potential. It's amazing.
There is a book at the Texarkana Public Library on Ralph McQuarrie called Archives, and in there you can go and see the work that he did other work for my dad, including The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and there are correlations between Darth Vader and the Phantom Killer. There were also, he did Boggy Creek 2, The Legend Continues, and John Scalari shared diary entries from the time in 75. He does the work for Boggy Creek 2 in 75. And he's working on Empire Strikes Back at exactly the same time. So if you look at the diary entries and what he was working at, you see the correlations between Boggy Creek 2 and Empire Strikes Back. So Texarkana, you have a great connection to Star Wars.
Yeah. And incidentally, the painting itself, the actual oil painting had been lost for years, and the whereabouts was a rumor, and it was like the Fouke Monster. There had been sightings of it, and actually, I was appearing many years ago at a Comic-Con in Texarkana, and a girl walked by and goes, "My mom's got that painting." Like, what? I've been looking for it for years, so I was able to get the painting, purchase it, and then when Pam came along, return it to the family because it basically should have never left. With the intent that someday that could be in a museum or something like that, and while it's cool on my wall, the right thing is the right thing, and also this movie, like I've always, from the beginning, is to champion this movie and to share it, and so the oil painting is in the possession of Pam and the family, so hopefully someday it'll be on display.
I have a question. I would like to direct this to everybody that was in the movie. I'm curious about life after Boggy Creek. So, one, just what happened? What have you done since then, just in your lives? And how has Boggy Creek followed you through the years?
Okay, that's
Oh, good gracious goodness. That monster has haunted me longer than my marriage lasted. Let me tell you that. Oh, Lord, slap me silly and call me Wanda. Okay. I broke off an engagement right after the movie, went to the University of Texas, majored in theater, I did musicals. I didn't go the film route so much, I went the musical route, did touring shows. I just really was into musical theater, and then I fell in love with a place called Anderson High School in Austin, Texas. Hook and Horns, by the way. And I taught there until I met my ex-husband, who is a very famous concert violinist. We moved to Nice, France. He was with the Orchestre de Camp Provence de Côte d'Azur. And then he was a wonderful violinist, still is, but not a good husband. I went back to God's country, Austin. My family got sick, and I moved back to Texarkana, and here I am. And I taught her son, and I love him.
Aaron?
Third time's tough.
You got this, Aaron. You got this.
Okay, so yeah, really quickly, I have always had a foot in the film industry. The first 10 years of my childhood actually were defined by Charlie's pictures and the work my father did with Charlie. So I grew up on location. I was a part of the Charles B. Pierce circus when I was a kid. It was, the movie sets were my playground. And so, the impression that kind of work made on me has infected me with, this disease called cinephilia. And I think it probably culminated in '95 when I found myself one of the largest collectors of educational film, print film, 16mm film from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I amassed over 4,000 individual reels of film in my personal library, and became the purveyor of this ephemeral media, and was looking for ways to promote it. It's probably around 1998, the last time I saw Charlie, and I was driving down to Texarkana from my home in Kansas City for a reunion with my family, and stopped by a car lot in DeQueen. And that would have been, lo and behold, unbeknownst to me at the time until I got out of the car, Kenneth's car lot, Charlie's brother's car lot, and Charlie happened to be there. And he walked up to me and I said, Charlie Pierce? I had not seen him probably since I was 11 years old. And I had an opportunity to let him know that he was single-handedly responsible for the 4,000 freaking reels of film that were taking over my house. And he got a chuckle out of that. He thought that was really great. And but I've done film work since. I am working with another independent filmmaker genius named Paul Bonnell out in California, who has cast me as Mr. Projector, which is a character of my own creation that I actually developed as a response to having had all this 16mm educational film. I felt there was a cultural significance and relevance to the film, and there needed to be a creative way to get that media out into the public. And I developed this crazy character from the 1950s and early 60s, whose sole body of knowledge only consists of what the government wanted us to know in the 50s. And that character was cast in a film that went into production in 2010 called The Ghastly Love of Johnny X. Wonderful throwback to the 50s sci-fi musical. It was a grab bag of everything, but brought back Kevin McCarthy. It was his last film. He was in the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It was with Paul Williams, who was a fantastic person to work with, and Creed Bratton, if you know Creed Bratton of The Office, kind of quirky, interesting fellow. So the follow-up film to that will go into production. Oh, I'll just be really quick about this. The Legend of Boggy Creek is often cited as being the 9th highest grossing film of its year of release. I mean, that's in a list that includes The Godfather, The Cabaret, for heaven's sake. So it was high up there on the gross factor. The last film I was in, The Ghastly Love of Johnny X, 2012 release, the lowest grossing film of 2012. My film career is bookmarked by this ridiculous high and this crazy low. So that's a little thing. But the next follow-up film goes into production next year, and that means I'm going to have to cut off my hair. But anyway, that's my trajectory.
Are you an opera singer?
Yes, I actually am an opera singer. I am fully. I'm not even warmed up, but let's see if I can do it. Hey, you want me to do it?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, hey, Travis Crabtree. I don't know, that's more broad.
Do you see what I see?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, say
yeah, yeah.
But actually, we're coming out of I'm going to add, because I have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'm going to just add, though, that I have had my career in theater, but I have so many students, like her son Banks, that have done wonderful things, and some of them, I get to see them on TV every night. I get to see them on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I've got some that are female impersonators in New York and Key West. And just on Supergirl, Desperate Housewives, it goes on. And I'm so very, very proud of my babies.
Kathy, what have you been doing up to?
I've remained active in community theater. I was on the founding board of Texarkana Repertory Company, and it's gone on. It's still going on for a long time. So, and I'm a mental health therapist. So. Figure that one out.
Well, I was on several sets, Bootleggers and Winterhawk, after The Legend of Boggy Creek. The actors and actresses began to be people that you had seen on TV. Some of them were extras. Jacqueline Smith, anybody remember her? Jacqueline Smith, Charlie? Yeah. Yes. Well, she was actually, what was she in Bootleggers?
Yes, she was.
Bootleggers, okay. So we got to see that, which was just wonderful. And then I started a career in education and had my 2 sons. When my oldest son got into college, he got into radio, TV, and film, and he got very excited about this movie. So it's just been a lot of fun, and thank you so much, Pam, for everything you've done. She reached out to me on Facebook several years ago and asked me if I was the ginger that had been in this movie. So we developed a friendship. I've watched her daughters grow, and she's very warm, just like your father. And I traded my first saddle for a scuba tank. It's quite a new experience.
Glenn, you're a Marine. Tell people what you've been up to aside from the iconic scenes in the movie.
Well, after I did Boggy Creek, I went in the Marines for 4 years, and then we went over and visited my folks. They were in France. I hadn't done any acting since Boggy Creek, though. No other movies or anything. I guess I was too poor. See my sock when I come out of there? But I've enjoyed every minute of making this movie, I tell you. I like it. And everybody on it was great. And they did their part good too. And Lyle, I thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Yeah, first thing I met Glenn in Texarkana, and I went home and told my dad, remember the guy in Boggy Creek, the guy that was on the toilet, he jumped in? I was at his house. My dad's like, I'm like, yes, I'm still that kid, you know. Jerry, have you been in any hunting scenes in any other movies?
My aspirations for going to Hollywood sort of expired after 2 weeks of the movie showing. I got no phone calls, so my aspirations for the movie was to make my family and children and grandchildren realize that I am a movie star in their eyes. And I won't ask them to stand up, but they had supported me over the years for this wonderful movie. After the career ended with movie making, I went on to work in the healthcare administration and retired a few years ago, and just glad to be a part of this wonderful celebration tonight.
And speaking of James Tennyson, he was in other movies.
Right, so after Boggy Creek, James was also in Bootleggers as Mr. Slayton, who discovers the main protagonist as being naked in their automobile as they come into the Slayton store after having their clothes stolen from them. And then he was in, after a movie which would never have been made had it not been for Boggy Creek. There was a 1979 movie called Revenge of Bigfoot, where he played actually a man named Herb Jones, no doubt in allusion to the Herb Jones of Boggy Creek. And then in 1984, he was in Boggy Creek 2. So I know James would have been absolutely thrilled. He died in 2002, so James, he lived in Corpus Christi at the time, but he would have been thrilled to see the quality of this restoration, the cinematography. It's just amazing. So wish you could have been here. Yes.
James was also the historian for Texarkana, and my father would hire him to do a lot of the background research work. So in addition to acting, he was also a researcher historian.
Yeah, in fact, real quick. Yeah, so James was not credited, but he was informally a consultant for the town that dreaded sundown. And so that's, it's possible that the trombone scene could have been influenced by James and Charles Pierce's discussion, but that's a story for another time.
Pass the mic down. So what other, your father, what other movies did he score?
Well, with Mr. Pierce, he scored Bootleggers. Let's see, what was the next one? Town That Dreaded Sundown, Winds of Autumn, Winterhawk, I believe. He did quite a few. It was Few Victors, yeah. So it ended up being a very significant business relationship for my father. He respected Charlie greatly. I remember him coming into the studio, and I've told Pam the stories.
And it was your father's post-production house also?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
He wasn't just the composer, he also had a production house.
Yes.
And I believe that it was your father that extended another approximately $60,000 in credit that covered the ending of the film being made, the editing, the sound. I believe that also Ralph McQuarrie came in.
That's right, yeah. It was, I think, because of the Mr. Clark and I again were talking about the fact that the independent films, there were a group of people that there's a relationship, especially in those days. It was a little bit different than now. Now there's so many independent filmmakers and so many films made every year. But my father had known the editor, Tom Boutros. Yeah, Tom they met at Disney. He was the editor of the magical, Wonderful World of Color that Disney used to have, I think, on Sunday evenings. And so they worked on a few films together. He knew Ralph because my dad had done, for the Apollo program, CBS had what they call bumpers. It's the beginning and the end of the news broadcast as they come in and out of commercial. And so my father wrote the music, and he was hired by a company called Reel 3, and Ralph was doing all the animation. So when you saw on the news of the rockets separating the stages, and Ralph was doing a lot of that. So, and my father had great respect for him, a wonderful artist. And I still think that Bigfoot poster is the scariest Bigfoot. He's so athletic, and he looks like if he came after you, you'd be in trouble. But so that's true. Yeah. So there was a lot of connections that were pulled together like that. But they had a very Charlie had a great influence on my dad, you know. And I think it afforded my father a wonderful opportunity to write, you know. So he was very grateful about that as well.
There was a recent segment on CBS Sunday Morning titled something like The Golden Age of Documentary, talking about today is the golden age of documentaries. And they were referencing 25 years ago, documentaries were made with musical scores written specifically for the films. And it was actually done 45 years ago with Mr. Mendoza Nava writing the soundtrack for the Legend of Boggy Creek documentary. So.
All right, we'd like to thank our panelists so much for sharing their stories with us this evening. And we want to make sure that you all know that many of the panelists are going to be out front here signing autographs, and invite you all to stay and talk with him and get an autograph. And let's have a big round of applause.
On the autograph, there's going to be on two different levels here. Some folks on the top, some on the bottom because of the tables and so forth. So be sure to look upstairs if you want to get your poster signed, and just funnel people through as quick as we can. There's a lot of folks and all that. But thanks so much, and it's an honor to have been a part of any of this. And let's give a big round of applause to those that made this movie. Pam Pierce, thanks so much for coming out tonight.